What if the single decision that has shaped every relationship, every missed opportunity, every moment of doubt, and every time you have settled for less than you were genuinely worth, was never about the people around you, the circumstances you were handed, or the luck you were denied? What if it was always, only, entirely about the relationship you have been quietly building or quietly destroying with yourself, day after day, in every unguarded moment and every small internal choice? What if I told you that the moment you genuinely begin to love yourself, not as a concept, not as a weekend intention, not as a motivational quote you save on your phone and never return to, but as a lived, practiced, and unshakable daily commitment, every single area of your life begins to reorganize itself in ways you cannot yet imagine? Most people will never discover this. They will spend their entire lives reaching outward for approval, for validation, for someone to finally make them feel worthy, without ever realizing that the love they are so desperately searching for has always been available inside them, waiting patiently to be claimed. They will chase relationships, accumulate achievements, and collect recognition, all while the one relationship that could change everything remains neglected. This audiobook is your turning point. By the time you finish, you will not simply understand self-love as an abstract idea. You will know, at a neurological, psychological, and deeply personal level, exactly how to build the most transformative relationship of your life, the one with yourself. Welcome to Elite Success Audiobooks. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Hidden Epidemic Destroying Your Life. Here is a number that should stop you in your tracks. Research indicates that over 85% of people struggle with low self-esteem and genuine self-acceptance. That means the overwhelming majority of humans walking this planet carry within them a quiet but constant rejection of who they are. They do not fully trust themselves. They do not genuinely believe in themselves. And deep down, they do not truly love themselves. But what makes this even more unsettling is that most of these people have no awareness that this is the root of their suffering. They point to other people, to difficult circumstances, to challenging childhoods, to financial pressure, to failed relationships, never realizing that all of those external struggles are symptoms of one unaddressed internal wound. Think about it honestly and without flinching. If you had a close friend who reminded you of your past failures every morning without fail, who whispered that you weren't capable every time you attempted something new, who told you that you were too much in some moments and never enough in others, would you continue to keep that person in your life? Would you trust their perspective? Would you feel energized and confident in their presence? Of course not. Yet this is precisely the voice that most people wake up to every single day. The internal dialogue running continuously in the background of your mind is often more brutal and relentless than anything your most critical enemy could say to your face. You say things to yourself that you would never direct at another human being. You hold yourself to impossible standards while finding reasons to forgive everyone else around you. You replay your mistakes for years while allowing others' errors to fade naturally from memory. This constant internal rejection creates a cascade that touches every corner of your life in ways both visible and invisible. When you do not love yourself, every decision you make carries the quiet weight of unworthiness. You accept less than you deserve in your career, in your relationships, in the opportunities you allow yourself to pursue, because some part of you quietly believes you aren't worthy of more. You remain in situations that diminish you, because leaving would require first believing you deserve something genuinely better. You hold back from pursuing the things that excite you most because a persistent inner voice says you probably aren't capable enough to see them through. The absence of self-love shows up in subtle behavioral patterns as well. You might find yourself unable to make significant choices without first checking in with several other people for reassurance. You might be caught in perfectionism, endlessly refining, never finishing, never feeling like anything you produce is truly good enough to share. You might recognize self-sabotage operating quietly in your own behavior, watching yourself pull back or create unnecessary conflict right at the moment when something genuinely good is beginning to emerge, as though some unconscious part of you doesn't believe you deserve for things to go well. Research in neuroscience has demonstrated consistently that people who carry chronic self-rejection have heightened activity in the brain's threat detection systems. Their minds are perpetually scanning the environment for signs of danger, disapproval, or rejection, even in situations that are completely safe and supportive. This state of constant internal alertness is profoundly draining and makes genuine growth nearly impossible to sustain. When your brain operates as though you are under threat, it shuts down the very functions you need most: creativity, clear thinking, emotional steadiness, and the willingness to take the kinds of intentional risks that lead to meaningful change. Perhaps the deepest cost of not loving yourself is the disconnection it creates between you and your own instincts. When you have spent years performing for others, shaping yourself into whoever they seem to need you to be in any given moment, you gradually lose access to your own inner knowing. You make career decisions based on what will impress people rather than what genuinely fulfills you. You enter relationships based on who others approve of rather than who truly resonates with your authentic self. The encouraging reality, however, is this: self-love is not a gift you either arrive with or are permanently denied. It is a skill. It is something that can be built, practiced, and strengthened over time, in exactly the same way physical fitness or any other meaningful capability develops. But before you can build it, one crucial distinction must be clear. Genuine self-love has nothing to do with arrogance, entitlement, or self-absorption. It is about constructing a grounded, honest, and compassionate relationship with the person you are, treating yourself with the same care, patience, and genuine understanding you would naturally extend to someone you deeply respect. When you genuinely love yourself, the entire architecture of your life begins to shift. You make choices from a place of inner strength rather than quiet desperation. You attract healthier relationships because you are no longer modeling self-neglect and teaching others that it is acceptable. You pursue paths that align with your actual values rather than paths designed to earn someone else's approval. And when life gets difficult, as it always eventually does, you recover with far greater speed because your sense of worth is no longer dependent on whether everything is going perfectly. Most importantly, when you genuinely love yourself, you become capable of receiving love from others in a way you never truly could before. You stop trying to earn it through performance. You stop bargaining for it through ongoing self-sacrifice. You simply allow it as the natural and unconditional experience it was always meant to be. Chapter 2. The Science of Self-Worth. To build genuine self-love, it helps enormously to understand what is actually happening inside your brain when you experience self-worth versus self-rejection. Neuroscience has uncovered extraordinary insights about how the mind processes thoughts and feelings related to the self, and this knowledge provides a clear, evidence-based pathway for transforming the internal relationship you carry. When you hold genuinely positive thoughts about yourself, your brain's reward system becomes active, releasing dopamine and serotonin, the same neurochemicals associated with motivation, satisfaction, and emotional well-being. This is not abstract self-help philosophy. This is measurable brain chemistry that researchers can observe and document in real time. Neuroimaging studies consistently show that people who practice self-compassion demonstrate increased engagement in the regions of the brain responsible for emotional balance, sustained motivation, and psychological resilience. On the other side of this equation, when you engage in self-criticism or self-rejection, your brain activates the very same regions that respond to physical pain. This is why harsh self-judgment genuinely hurts, not metaphorically, but neurologically. Your mind cannot meaningfully distinguish between physical threats and emotional ones. When you attack yourself internally, your brain responds as though you are facing real danger, triggering the same stress chemistry that would be released in a genuinely threatening situation. This chronic activation of your stress system carries devastating consequences for your health, your cognitive performance, and your overall lived experience. When the brain operates in threat mode, higher-order thinking, creativity, strategic reasoning, emotional regulation becomes significantly impaired. You become reactive rather than thoughtful, driven by fear rather than guided by wisdom. Research by Dr. Kristen Neff, one of the world's foremost authorities on self-compassion, has demonstrated that individuals who treat themselves with genuine kindness display lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone that disrupts immune function, sleep quality, and cognitive clarity. These same individuals also show greater heart rate variability, a recognized marker of emotional resilience and the capacity to recover effectively from stress. The truly remarkable aspect of this science is what researchers call neuroplasticity, the brain's lifelong capacity to reorganize and rewire itself based on repeated experience. Every time you consciously choose compassion over criticism, you reinforce the neural pathways associated with self-acceptance. Every time you speak to yourself with genuine kindness, you lay down new connections that gradually make self-love more natural, more automatic, and more consistently accessible. The brain's default mode network, the cluster of regions that activates when you are not focused on an external task, plays a meaningful role in how people with anxiety and depression relate to themselves. In those who struggle with self-worth, this network frequently generates repetitive self-critical loops that seem impossible to interrupt. However, consistent mindfulness and meditation practices have been shown to meaningfully alter these activity patterns, reducing the frequency and intensity of self-attacking rumination over time. Mirror neurons also contribute to the dynamics of self-love in ways that might surprise you. When you treat yourself with genuine compassion, This internal disposition naturally extends outward into your interactions with others, generating the kind of warm and authentic connections that reinforce your sense of belonging and worth. Oxytocin, widely recognized as the bonding neurochemical, is released not only during meaningful connection with others, but also during genuinely self-compassionate moments. When you comfort and care for yourself during difficult periods, your brain releases the same compound that creates feelings of safety and closeness in your most meaningful relationships. This is precisely why self-love is never truly selfish. It is, in a biological sense, active preparation for loving others more completely and sustainably. Your amygdala, the brain's primary alarm structure, becomes measurably less reactive in individuals who practice self-compassion consistently. This translates into a reduced tendency to perceive threats where none exist, a decreased likelihood of taking things personally, and a greatly improved capacity to meet difficulty with clarity rather than panic. Understanding the science of self-worth is important because it dismantles the notion that self-love is a luxury or an indulgence. It is, instead, a biological necessity for peak functioning, emotional resilience, and authentic happiness. When you love yourself, you are not being soft or self-indulgent. You are actively creating the neurochemical conditions your brain requires to perform at its highest level. Chapter 3. How your childhood programmed you to reject yourself. Every human being arrives in this world with an innate sense of worth and self-acceptance already present. Observe any young child, and you witness self-love in its most natural and uncomplicated form. They do not question their right to take up space. They do not wonder whether they are acceptable exactly as they are. They express their needs, their emotions, their joy, and their discomfort without apology or shame. They are entirely at ease within themselves, needing no external justification for their existence. So, what happens between that natural state of wholeness and the epidemic of self-rejection that characterizes most adult experience? The answer lives in the programming absorbed during the years when the brain is most impressionable. When every message, every interaction, and every repeated experience is literally shaping the neural architecture of the developing mind. Your earliest caregivers, however genuinely well-intentioned, were inevitably shaped by their own unresolved wounds and unconscious patterns. If they carried self-rejection within themselves, and most people do, they could not model something they had never learned to practice. If they were raised in environments where love was conditional on behavior or achievement, they unconsciously replicated those same dynamics in the environment they created for you. Perhaps you absorbed the belief that love must be earned through performance. You may have received warmth and recognition when you succeeded, and encountered withdrawal or criticism when you fell short. Your developing mind, wired above all else for connection and safety, drew a straightforward conclusion. Your worth is tied to what you produce. This early equation became the foundation of a lifelong pattern, always seeking external validation, never quite feeling genuinely sufficient. Or perhaps you learned that your emotions were inconvenient or inappropriate. You may have been told to stop being dramatic when you expressed pain, been discouraged from showing anger, or been encouraged to toughen up when vulnerability emerged naturally. Your brain, interpreting these messages literally, concluded that parts of your authentic self were unacceptable, creating the early beginnings of an internal rejection of your own emotional experience. Some children come to understand that their needs are burdensome. They are made to feel like too much, too sensitive, too demanding of attention and care. They learn to make themselves smaller, to take up less space, to minimize their own experience, to apologize for existing too loudly or needing too visibly. These children grow into adults who feel chronic guilt for having desires, who struggle to ask for what they genuinely need, and who find themselves constantly accommodating others at the expense of their own well-being. The wound of not being truly seen and accepted for who you are creates what some researchers have described as the authentic self wound. Your natural personality, your real preferences, your genuine way of engaging with the world gradually gets buried beneath layers of adaptive strategies designed to maintain connection and safety in an environment that felt conditional or unpredictable. These adaptations were genuinely necessary in childhood, but what once kept you safe and connected may now be constraining you in ways you haven't yet fully recognized. Cultural and social messaging add further layers of conditioning that compound the original programming. You absorbed narratives about gender, success, appearance, and worth that may have little or nothing to do with your authentic nature. Boys are frequently taught that emotional depth is weakness. Girls are often taught that assertiveness or ambition is threatening to others. These cultural programs generate ongoing internal friction between who you genuinely are and who you believe you are supposed to be to remain acceptable. The development of shame plays a particularly destructive role in self-rejection throughout this process. Shame differs from guilt in one essential way. Guilt says I did something wrong, while shame says I am something wrong. When children are repeatedly made to feel fundamentally defective or unacceptable at their core, shame becomes integrated into their very sense of identity. They carry the quiet but powerful conviction that if people could truly see inside them, they would be rejected and left. Perfectionism frequently develops as a defense mechanism against this deep shame. If you can achieve enough, perform impressively enough, never make visible mistakes, then perhaps you will finally be safe from the rejection you most fear. But perfectionism is at its core a sophisticated form of self-punishment. It establishes standards no human being can sustainably maintain, then attacks you relentlessly for your inevitable humanity. Understanding how this programming was established is not about assigning blame or anchoring yourself in victimhood. It is about recognizing that your pattern of self-rejection was never the truth about who you are. It was a survival response to circumstances that required adaptation. And here is the genuinely hopeful and scientifically grounded reality. Neuroplasticity means your brain retains the capacity for meaningful change at any age. The patterns established in childhood are powerful, but they are not permanent. With sustained, conscious intention and the right practices applied consistently, you can rewire your neural circuitry for self-acceptance, becoming, over time, the steady and compassionate presence for yourself that perhaps no one fully showed you how to be. Chapter 4. Breaking Free from the Prison of External Validation. Among the many barriers to self-love, few are as pervasive or as quietly destructive as the addiction to external validation. This pattern is so normalized in modern culture that most people simply do not recognize it as a problem. They assume it is simply human nature to need approval, to feel genuinely good about themselves only when others praise them, to measure their worth primarily by the recognition and appreciation they receive from the outside world. But here is the understanding that changes everything. As long as your sense of worth remains tethered to external sources, genuine self-love stays perpetually out of reach. You will live in an endless loop, seeking approval, experiencing temporary relief when you receive it, then sinking back into emptiness when the effect fades. You will be orienting the whole of your life around other people's shifting opinions rather than your own values and deepest desires. External validation dependency shows up in countless recognizable forms. Perhaps you are unable to make significant decisions without first consulting multiple people for reassurance. Maybe you monitor social media responses with an anxiety you rarely fully acknowledge, feeling a quiet deflation when a post doesn't land the way you had hoped. You might remain in a career, a relationship, or a living situation that genuinely doesn't fulfill you because it earns consistent approval from people whose opinions you have allowed to matter more than your own authentic experience. Some people construct genuinely impressive external lives, achievements, credentials, recognitions, not because these things intrinsically excite them, but because they generate the admiration and approval that temporarily sustain their fragile sense of worth. They pursue relentlessly, only to discover that each new level of accomplishment requires even more external fuel to maintain the feeling. They become, in a very real sense, prisoners of the success they worked so hard to achieve. Others develop the people-pleasing pattern, agreeing with perspectives they don't genuinely hold, saying yes when every instinct says no, reshaping themselves constantly into whatever form seems most likely to earn acceptance in the current moment. They gradually lose contact with their own actual preferences, genuine limits, and authentic desires until they are no longer fully certain who they are beneath all the accommodation. The digital landscape has dramatically accelerated this dynamic in ways previous generations never encountered. Social platforms are engineered at a fundamental level to trigger your validation-seeking instincts with precision. Every response, every reaction, every visible indicator of approval releases a small neurochemical reward that reinforces the behavior and deepens the dependency over time. You begin, almost without awareness, to curate your life for external consumption rather than living it from your own authentic center. But external validation is inherently and irreparably unstable. Other people's opinions shift based on their mood, their own insecurities, their personal circumstances, and countless factors that have absolutely nothing to do with your actual worth or capability. Anchoring your self-worth to something this variable guarantees chronic emotional instability and a persistent undercurrent of anxiety. The validation dependency also creates what psychologists describe as the hedonic treadmill effect. Each dose of external approval provides a temporary lift, but your baseline quickly returns to its previous level, requiring ever-increasing inputs of external recognition to generate the same feeling of adequacy. Breaking free from this cycle begins with one clear recognition. External validation can never fill the void left by internal self-rejection. No quantity of praise, recognition, or approval from outside yourself can substitute for genuine self-acceptance. The path forward requires developing what might be called internal validation, learning to become your own most consistent and reliable source of acknowledgement, encouragement, and genuine appreciation. This means celebrating your own growth without waiting for someone else to notice it first, trusting your own judgment rather than outsourcing every consequential decision to others' opinions, recognizing your own sustained efforts even in the many moments when no one else is observing. Developing internal validation does not mean dismissing feedback or becoming closed to other perspectives. In fact, genuine self-love tends to make you more authentically open to constructive input because your sense of worth is no longer threatened by the mere possibility that improvement is available. The goal is a fundamental reorientation from asking what will people think to asking what feels genuinely right for me, from performing for an audience to living authentically from your own center, from seeking approval to seeking alignment with who you actually are at your core. This shift requires real courage because it involves the genuine risk of disappointing people who preferred the more accommodating version of you. But what you will discover as you make this shift with increasing consistency is that the people who genuinely matter will connect with you more deeply when you show up as yourself, and the connections that cannot survive your authenticity were never truly about you in the first place. When you reclaim your own inner approval as your primary reference point, you reclaim something essential and irreplaceable: the authority over your own emotional experience and your own sense of worth. This is one of the most transformative and liberating steps available on the entire journey toward unshakable, lasting self-love. You are not simply changing a habit or adopting a new strategy. You are reclaiming your fundamental right to be the authority of your own life, to define your worth from the inside rather than waiting for the outside world to grant it to you. That reclamation is where everything genuinely begins. That is where your real story starts. And that is precisely where this journey is taking you, one deliberate and courageous choice at a time. Chapter 5: The Self-Love Foundation System. Now that you understand the barriers to self-love and the forces that have worked against it for most of your life, it is time to build something genuinely solid, the foundation that will support lasting self-acceptance in a way that does not collapse under pressure. This is not about positive thinking or surface-level affirmations you repeat without real conviction. This is about creating a systematic, evidence-based approach to developing an unshakable relationship with yourself, one grounded in psychology and neuroscience rather than wishful intent. The foundation of self-love rests on 4 interconnected pillars: self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-compassion, and self-care. Each pillar supports and strengthens the others in a way that creates a stable base from which authentic self-love can genuinely grow and sustain itself over time. Self-awareness is the first pillar, and it must come first. for one simple reason. You cannot love what you do not genuinely know. Most people are relative strangers to themselves, operating primarily on autopilot, moving through their days without truly understanding the patterns driving their thoughts, the triggers behind their reactions, or the beliefs quietly shaping their choices. They respond to life from unconscious programming rather than conscious, deliberate choice. Developing self-awareness means learning to become the curious and non-judgmental observer of your own inner experience. Start by paying genuine attention to your internal dialogue throughout the day. What tone does your inner voice use when addressing you? Is it encouraging and supportive, or critical and undermining? Notice specifically what arises when you make a mistake. What does your inner voice immediately say to you? When you achieve something meaningful, how do you actually respond to yourself in the privacy of your own mind? Pay sustained attention to your emotional patterns as well. What situations reliably trigger anger, sadness, fear, or joy in you? How do you typically respond when these states arise? Do you suppress them, express them appropriately, or find yourself overwhelmed and reactive? Notice how your emotional state affects your energy levels, your decisions, and your interactions with the people around you throughout the day. Observe your behavioral patterns with the same quality of honest curiosity. Which habits genuinely serve your well-being and authentic growth, and which ones quietly undermine them? What patterns keep reappearing in different areas of your life, and what role do your own choices and responses play in sustaining them? Self-awareness is not about judgment or self-analysis that spirals into more self-criticism. It is about honest, compassionate observation that gives you the information you need to make genuinely conscious and aligned choices. Self-acceptance is the second pillar, and it is perhaps the most genuinely challenging for people who have spent their lives operating from the belief that love must be earned through continuous self-improvement. Self-acceptance does not mean abandoning growth or becoming complacent about areas that matter to you. It means acknowledging your actual reality without resistance, embracing your full humanity, and choosing to love yourself as you are right now, not as you intend to become after sufficient self-correction. True self-acceptance means embracing your shadows as fully as your light. You have aspects of your personality that you might not particularly admire, but rejecting these parts only amplifies their unconscious power over your behavior. When you accept your jealousy, your fears, your insecurities, and your genuine flaws as components of the shared human experience, rather than evidence of your personal inadequacy, you can engage with them consciously and skillfully, rather than being driven by them blindly. A practice that many people find both challenging and genuinely transformative. Stand in front of a mirror and say aloud, "I accept myself exactly as I am right now." Notice every flicker of resistance that arises in response. The parts of yourself that feel most difficult to accept are typically the parts that most urgently require your love and conscious integration. Instead of immediately trying to change or correct these aspects, simply acknowledge them with compassion and curiosity. Self-acceptance also means accepting your past as unchangeable while transforming your relationship to it. You cannot alter what has already occurred, but you can genuinely shift how you carry it. forgiving yourself for past mistakes, not because those actions were necessarily acceptable, but because continuing to hold them against yourself with chronic shame and regret actively prevents you from moving forward into the life that is still available to you. Self-compassion is the third pillar, and it functions as the direct antidote to the inner critic that has been quietly running so much of your inner life. Dr. Kristen Neff defines self-compassion as treating yourself with the same quality of kindness you would naturally offer to a close friend who is struggling or suffering. It involves acknowledging your pain honestly, recognizing that difficulty and suffering are inseparable from the human experience, and choosing to respond to yourself with genuine care rather than habitual self-attack. When you make a mistake or face a setback, instead of immediately launching an internal assault, practice self-compassion by asking yourself simply, what do I genuinely need right now? Perhaps you need comfort or honest encouragement, or simply acknowledgement that this is difficult and it is allowed to be. The practice of giving yourself what you actually need rather than what you believe you deserve based on your perceived failures is profoundly transformative when practiced consistently over time. The self-compassion pause is a practical tool available to you in any difficult moment. Place your hand on your heart and say quietly, "This is a moment of difficulty. Difficulty is part of every human life. May I be genuinely kind to myself in this moment." Self-care is the fourth pillar, and it extends far beyond the comfortable and pleasurable practices that tend to come to mind first when the word is used. True self-care means taking genuine responsibility for your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being in a sustained and intentional way. It means making choices that honor your actual needs and support your authentic growth, even when those choices require real discipline or the courage to disappoint someone. Physical self-care means nourishing your body with adequate nutrition, consistent movement, sufficient sleep, and appropriate medical care when needed. Your body is the vehicle through which you experience everything in your life, and treating it with consistent care is among the most fundamental acts of self-love available to you. Emotional self-care involves establishing and maintaining healthy limits, processing difficult emotions in ways that allow them to move through you, and surrounding yourself with people and environments that genuinely support rather than consistently drain you. Mental self-care means being genuinely intentional about what you feed your mind, engaging with content that stimulates and uplifts while being selective about exposure to material that reliably amplifies anxiety or self-doubt. Spiritual self-care, in whatever form, feels authentic to your experience, involves connecting with something that feels larger than your immediate daily concerns and finding genuine meaning and purpose that orients your life. These four pillars work together as an integrated system that supports the entire structure of self-love. Self-awareness reveals where greater acceptance, compassion, or care is most needed. Self-acceptance creates the safety required to be fully honest about your genuine needs. Self-compassion provides the emotional foundation for facing difficult truths without collapsing. Self-care ensures that you take consistent, concrete action to genuinely support your well-being. Building this foundation takes real time and consistent daily practice. Begin with small, specific actions in each area and expand them gradually as they become natural habits. Self-love is not a destination to be reached, but an ongoing practice to be lived with increasing intention, honesty, and care. Chapter 6. Silencing the Inner Critic Forever. The inner critic is perhaps the most persistently destructive force standing between you and authentic self-love. This voice in your mind constantly evaluates, judges, and undermines your confidence with a relentlessness that most people would never tolerate from anyone else in their lives. It catalogs every mistake you have ever made and uses them as predictive evidence for future failure. For most people, this internal critic has become so familiar and so constant that they have made the deeply costly mistake of identifying with it, accepting its running commentary as their own genuine thoughts and its harsh judgments as objective truth about who they are. But here is what you must genuinely understand. The inner critic is not you. It is a collection of internalized voices absorbed from your past, from critical caregivers, from cultural messages, from educational environments that prioritized conformity over authentic expression, and from survival mechanisms that once served a clear purpose but now work consistently against your happiness and growth. The inner critic frequently develops as a protective strategy during formative years. If you grew up in an environment where external criticism was common or unpredictable, your brain learned a kind of preemptive defense. If you could identify and correct your own flaws before others noticed them, perhaps you could reduce your vulnerability to rejection. This self-critical pattern became a strategy for maintaining safety and belonging. It also draws sustained energy from perfectionist standards that many people develop early in life. If love and approval were experienced as conditional on performance, the brain internalized the belief that anything less than exceptional was potentially dangerous. The inner critic became the internal enforcer of these impossible and shifting standards, simultaneously pushing toward ideals no human can sustainably maintain while declaring every effort insufficient. What makes the inner critic particularly destructive is the convincing disguise it wears. It presents itself as a necessary motivational force, telling you that, without its constant vigilance, you would slide into laziness or delusion. But research tells a consistent and unambiguous story about this claim. Self-criticism reliably undermines motivation, impairs creative thinking, and degrades performance, while simultaneously increasing anxiety, deepening depression, and fueling the very self-sabotage it claims to prevent. The first essential step in changing your relationship with the inner critic is recognizing it as genuinely distinct from your authentic self. Begin paying deliberate attention to the character and content of your internal dialogue. Notice specifically when the voice becomes harsh, contemptuous, or relentlessly discouraging. Most people are genuinely startled when they observe with real honesty how cruel their internal commentary actually is throughout an ordinary day. Some people find it helpful to give the inner critic a distinct name or to visualize a specific image for it, a stern authority figure from the past, or anything that helps create psychological distance between this critical voice and your actual identity. The goal is to experience the critic as something that occurs in your mental space rather than something that constitutes who you are. Challenge the critic's authority by treating its statements as hypotheses that require evidence rather than established facts. When it declares that you are a failure, ask specifically what evidence genuinely supports that conclusion. When it compares you unfavorably to others, remind yourself that you are observing their carefully curated presentation while living your own unfiltered reality. When it predicts inevitable catastrophe, examine the realistic probability of that outcome with honest scrutiny. Most of the critic's most devastating statements simply dissolve under careful examination. Develop a genuinely compassionate internal voice as a deliberate and consistent counterweight. Practice what might be called the loving friend technique. When the inner critic launches an attack, pause and ask yourself honestly, what would I say to a dear friend who is facing this exact situation? Then offer yourself precisely those words with the same sincerity and warmth. You can establish clear limits with your inner critic, just as you would with any genuinely toxic influence in your external life. When it begins its familiar pattern, simply acknowledge it without extensive engagement. I hear you, and then consciously redirect your attention towards something more constructive and truthful. Meditation and mindfulness practices are particularly effective for transforming your relationship with the inner critic because they develop your capacity to observe thoughts without being automatically consumed by them. When you can witness the critic's commentary with a degree of calm detachment, its power to destabilize you diminishes significantly. The goal is not eliminating all self-critical thought, because some honest self-reflection serves genuine growth. The goal is a fundamental transformation from harsh, destructive self-attack to gentle, constructive self-honesty, from being your own most relentless adversary to becoming your own most reliable and genuinely understanding ally. Chapter 7: The Emotional Mastery Blueprint. One of the most significant and underappreciated barriers to genuine self-love is the fear and rejection of your own emotional experience. Most people have been thoroughly conditioned to view certain emotions as problematic, inappropriate, or genuinely dangerous. They have learned through repeated experience to suppress, avoid, or pass judgment on their emotional states rather than developing a healthy and mature relationship with them. This emotional disconnection creates persistent internal conflict and actively prevents the deep self-acceptance that authentic love requires. To love yourself fully and sustainably, you must learn to love all of yourself, including the complete range of your emotional experience. Emotional mastery is not about controlling or suppressing what you feel. It is about understanding your emotions, genuinely accepting their presence, and choosing how to respond to them with wisdom and care. Every emotion serves a real purpose and carries important information. Anger signals that something meaningful to you is being threatened. Sadness indicates loss and a genuine need for comfort and healing. Fear alerts you to potential danger requiring thoughtful preparation. Joy signals alignment with your authentic values and desires. Even the emotions that feel most uncomfortable, jealousy, shame, envy, carry valuable information about unmet needs and areas where your growth is being called forward. The problem was never the emotions themselves, but rather the relationship most people were taught to maintain with them. Many people absorbed in childhood the belief that certain emotional experiences were fundamentally unacceptable. Boys were frequently taught that expressing sadness or fear was weakness. Girls were often taught that anger was incompatible with being likable or appropriate. These messages created deep internal fractures. Parts of the emotional self became rejected and pushed underground, where they continue to operate without the benefit of conscious awareness or wise direction. When you reject your emotions, you simultaneously reject parts of yourself. This creates the internal fragmentation that most directly undermines self-love. Emotional suppression also produces serious consequences for physical and mental health. Research documents consistently that people who chronically suppress their emotional experience show higher rates of cardiovascular disease, immune system disruption, and mental health challenges. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They are stored in the body and unconscious mind, where they generate chronic tension and drive destructive behavioral patterns. The first step in developing emotional mastery is building emotional awareness. The capacity to notice and identify what you are genuinely feeling in real time, rather than on significant delay. Begin checking in with yourself multiple times throughout each day. Simply pause and ask, what am I actually feeling right now? Notice the physical sensations in your body, because emotions are experienced somatically as much as they are thought. Anger often appears as heat in the chest or tension in the jaw. Sadness may feel like heaviness around the heart. Fear frequently manifests as tightness in the stomach. Practice the RAIN technique for working with difficult emotions. RAIN stands for recognition, allowance, investigation, and non-identification. First, recognize what emotion is present without immediately moving to change it. Then, allow the emotion to exist without fighting its presence. Investigate it with genuine curiosity. Where does it live in your body, and what might it be communicating about your needs? Finally, practice non-identification. You are the awareness that observes the emotion, not the emotion itself. Develop practical strategies for healthy emotional regulation. Deep, deliberate breathing, consistent physical movement, honest journaling, and creative expression in any form. Learn progressively to sit with uncomfortable emotions without immediately escaping through distraction or numbing. When you can remain present with a difficult emotion, it typically moves through you more completely and resolves more naturally. Understand that emotions are temporary. The intensity you feel in any given moment will not remain at that level indefinitely. Emotions arise, reach their peak, and naturally subside when given the freedom to move. Reminding yourself of this during intense states helps you maintain perspective and avoid the trap of believing that what you feel right now defines what you will always feel. As you develop genuine emotional mastery, your relationship with yourself becomes progressively more accepting, more honest, and more genuinely compassionate. You will stop judging yourself for having a rich and complex inner emotional life and begin to appreciate it as an essential dimension of what makes you fully and genuinely human. This is not a small shift. It is one of the most liberating transformations available on the entire journey of self-love. When You can meet your own emotional experience with curiosity and care, rather than judgment and resistance. You begin to trust yourself in a way that changes everything. You become someone who can navigate difficulty without falling apart, who can feel deeply without losing direction, and who can move through the full range of human experience with a growing sense of inner steadiness. This is emotional maturity in its truest form, not the absence of difficult feelings, but the capacity to hold them with wisdom, meet them with honesty, and respond to them with compassion that extends both inward and outward. Chapter 8: Transforming Your Relationships Through Self-Love. One of the most immediate and tangible benefits of developing genuine self-love is the profound transformation it creates across all of your relationships. When you truly love yourself, you show up differently in every interaction, with greater honesty, clearer limits, and a quality of authentic presence that simply was not available when you were managing your self-rejection alongside every conversation. You naturally draw different kinds of people toward you. You create more authentic and sustainable connections. And most significantly, you stop using relationships as the primary mechanism for filling the void of self-rejection, which fundamentally and permanently changes the entire dynamic of how you connect with others. The relationship you maintain with yourself functions as the template for every other relationship in your life. If you are internally harsh and unforgiving with yourself, you will almost inevitably attract people who treat you with similar harshness. If you do not honor your own limits consistently, others will not honor them either. Not because they are malicious, but because you have taught them by example that your limits are negotiable and temporary. Many people approach relationships from a place of quiet, inner emptiness, hoping that another person will provide the love and genuine validation they cannot generate for themselves. This creates what psychologists describe as codependency, a dynamic where both individuals are essentially attempting to use the other to feel complete and worthy. These relationships are inherently unstable because they are built on mutual deficit rather than shared abundance and genuine generosity. When you genuinely love yourself, you enter relationships as a whole person rather than as someone seeking the missing half. You bring something real and valuable to offer rather than arriving primarily with needs that require filling. This fundamentally shifts the dynamic from anxious taking to generous giving. Healthy limits are perhaps the most important practical relationship skill that naturally emerges from genuine self-love. When you love yourself, protecting your energy, time, and emotional well-being becomes natural and non-negotiable rather than selfish or demanding. People who lack self-love typically struggle profoundly with limits because setting them feels like it could trigger the rejection they most fear. They say yes when every part of them wants to say no, tolerate treatment that consistently diminishes them, and sacrifice their own legitimate needs repeatedly to maintain an illusion of harmony. When you establish healthy limits from a place of genuine self-love, your relationships actually improve in measurable ways. You model self-respect in a way that authentically invites others to treat you with the same respect. You remain more fully present in the relationships you choose to invest in because you are not depleted by connections that consistently take more than they return. Self-love also fundamentally transforms how you navigate conflict in relationships. When you don't love yourself, any significant conflict feels like a direct threat to your sense of worth and belonging. When you genuinely love yourself, you can experience conflict as an opportunity for deeper understanding and genuine growth, rather than as an existential danger to be avoided. You can receive honest feedback without feeling personally destroyed by it. You can hold your own perspective while remaining genuinely curious about another's. Self-love also gives you the clarity and the courage to choose your relationships more intentionally over time. When you are operating from inner scarcity and the desperation of unmet needs, you often accept what is convenient or available rather than what is genuinely compatible and nourishing. When you love yourself, you enjoy your own company and are not afraid of solitude, which removes the desperation that consistently leads to poor relationship choices. Your existing relationships will also undergo meaningful transformation as your self-love deepens and becomes more consistent. Some will become more authentic and more satisfying as you show up with greater honesty and genuine presence. Others may naturally fade as you grow beyond dynamics based on mutual neediness or shared complaint. As your relationships improve through this foundation of genuine self-love, they become a sustained source of joy and real support, rather than ongoing stress and emotional drama, creating an ascending cycle where better relationships reinforce your self-love, which continues to attract even better relationships in return. This upward spiral is not accidental. It is the natural and predictable outcome of the most important decision you can ever make: the decision to love yourself first, consistently and without apology. When that decision becomes your foundation, rather than an occasional aspiration, the entire quality of your relational world begins to reflect it. You become the kind of person that others feel genuinely safe with, genuinely inspired by, and genuinely grateful to know. Not because you are performing or managing impressions, but because the love and clarity you have cultivated within yourself radiates naturally outward into every interaction you have. Chapter 9. The Self-Love Success Formula. Most people carry an unconscious belief that they need to achieve success before they can finally permit themselves to love who they are. They tell themselves that once they reach a certain income level, relationship status, or degree of social recognition, they will finally feel worthy of their own acceptance and care. But this backwards approach guarantees perpetual dissatisfaction because external achievements can never fill the void created by internal self-rejection. No matter how much you accumulate on the outside, the inside remains unchanged until you address it directly. The truth is the precise opposite of what most people assume. Self-love is not the reward for success. Self-love is the foundation from which genuine, sustainable success becomes possible. When you truly love yourself, you make decisions from a place of authentic strength rather than quiet fear. You pursue opportunities that align with your real desires rather than what you think will impress others or gain approval. You persist through inevitable challenges because your sense of worth is not dependent on every outcome going perfectly. You take meaningful risks because you know, at a fundamental level, that you can handle whatever arises from them. Self-love creates what psychologists call an internal locus of control, the recognition that your happiness and your success emerge primarily from your own choices, your own effort, and your own responses rather than from circumstances outside your control. This orientation is among the strongest predictors of achievement in every significant area of life, because it motivates consistent action and genuine resilience in the face of setbacks. When you don't love yourself, you seek validation through achievement in a way that becomes its own kind of trap. This creates a scarcity mindset, the persistent, anxious sense that there is not enough success, recognition, or love available, and that others achieving their goals somehow diminishes your own chances. This competitive desperation actually undermines your performance because the anxiety and fear it generates interfere with creativity, sound decision-making, and the quality of your relationships. When you love yourself, you operate from abundance rather than scarcity. You can genuinely celebrate others' success because their achievements carry no threat to your own worth. You collaborate effectively because you are not constantly trying to prove your value through competition. You take calculated risks because you are motivated by genuine growth and contribution rather than by the compulsive need to establish your adequacy to yourself and others. Self-love also eliminates the self-sabotage that derails so many people at the precise moment they are about to achieve something significant. When you don't genuinely believe you deserve good things, your unconscious mind will find ways, subtle and not so subtle, to undermine your efforts. You procrastinate on important work, create unnecessary conflicts, make careless errors, or generate drama that destroys opportunities. Your actions quietly align with what you unconsciously believe you deserve rather than what you consciously say you want. When you genuinely love yourself, you believe you deserve good outcomes, and your actions begin to align with that belief in concrete, observable ways. You follow through on commitments you have made to yourself. You invest in your own development with seriousness. You make choices that serve your long-term growth rather than only your immediate comfort. The self-love success formula operates through several interconnected principles that build on each other over time. Clarity of authentic values and genuine desires becomes possible only when you are not primarily seeking approval from others. When you love yourself, you can tune in to your real preferences and true interests rather than performing for an audience. This clarity allows you to set goals that actually motivate you from within, rather than goals that merely look impressive from the outside. Self-love also provides the emotional resilience that sustained effort requires. Success in any meaningful domain requires persistence through setbacks, failures, and extended periods of slow or invisible progress. When you love yourself, challenges don't threaten your fundamental sense of worth. You can engage with failures as learning experiences rather than as personal verdicts. You can adjust your approach without interpreting the need to adjust as evidence that you were never capable in the first place. The internal dialogue that accompanies genuine self-love is fundamentally different from the self-criticism that drives most people's efforts. Instead of, "I have to succeed to prove that I am worth something," the internal message becomes, "I deserve to pursue what genuinely matters to me and to express the potential I actually carry. This shift from proving to expressing creates a profoundly different experience of the journey, one that feels meaningful and sustainable rather than desperate and exhausting. Self-love also improves the quality of your decision-making because you are no longer clouded by the emotional static of constantly needing to prove yourself. You can evaluate opportunities with honest clarity, considering what truly serves your authentic growth rather than what protects your image or avoids criticism from others. Goal setting becomes more effective and more fulfilling when it is rooted in genuine self-love. You choose objectives that truly matter to you, rather than goals designed primarily to impress others. You persist with these authentic goals with greater consistency because they are aligned with your actual desires and values rather than with external expectations. And when success arrives from a foundation of self-love, it feels genuinely satisfying in a way it never does when success is pursued primarily to prove worthiness. You are not compelled to immediately move the goalposts. You can receive and enjoy what you have built while remaining grounded in your inherent value as a human being, independent of any external result. This is what it means to succeed from the inside out. This is why every genuine achievement expert, every serious researcher in positive psychology, and every person who has built something lasting and meaningful will tell you the same thing in different words. Who you are inside and how you relate to yourself determines everything else, not the other way around. Self-love is not something you earn after success. It is the very soil in which meaningful success is grown. Chapter 10. Mastering Self-Love During Life's Storms. The ultimate test of genuine self-love is not how you treat yourself when everything is going well and life feels manageable. The test is how you respond to yourself during life's inevitable storms, the periods of crisis, failure, rejection, loss, and profound uncertainty that visit every human life without exception. These challenging times reveal whether your self-love is genuinely deep and resilient, or whether it has been a fair weather practice all along. Learning to maintain genuine self-compassion during difficulty is what separates temporary self-improvement from lasting transformation. Many people practice something that resembles self-love only when they feel they have earned it, when they are being productive, meeting their own expectations, or making visible progress. But the moment they fail, make significant mistakes, or face real setbacks, their self-compassion disappears and is replaced by the familiar assault of self-criticism and harsh internal judgment. This conditional kindness is actually not love at all. It is simply another form of the performance-based worth that self-love is meant to replace. Genuine self-love is unconditional. It means treating yourself with genuine kindness and real understanding, especially when you are struggling, failing, or navigating circumstances that are genuinely difficult and painful. It means being your own steadiest and most dependable companion during your darkest moments, rather than joining the assault against yourself when you are most vulnerable. Life's storms often trigger our deepest wounds and reactivate our oldest patterns of self-rejection with an intensity that can feel overwhelming. A job loss might activate feelings of inadequacy that were first established in childhood. A significant relationship ending might trigger abandonment fears and the belief that you are fundamentally unlovable. A health crisis might surface feelings of vulnerability and mortality that overwhelm your ordinary coping mechanisms. These events can temporarily hijack your nervous system and throw you back into old patterns of self-attack as a default stress response. Understanding this process is genuinely important because it allows you to recognize that your self-critical thoughts during difficult times are not necessarily true or helpful. They are often trauma responses, old programming, or the brain's attempt to regain some sense of control in the face of uncertainty and pain. When you can recognize these thoughts as symptoms of stress, rather than accurate assessments of your worth and capability, you create the space to respond to them with compassion rather than with belief, and further self-attack. The practice of self-love during storms begins with accepting your humanity completely. Human beings experience pain, make mistakes, face genuine failures, and struggle with circumstances that feel beyond their capacity to manage. This is not a sign of weakness or inadequacy. It is the simple, universal reality of being alive in a world that does not guarantee anyone a smooth passage. When you can normalize your struggles, rather than treating them as personal evidence of your failure, you create the opening for self-compassion to emerge and do its genuine work. Emotional regulation during storms requires reminding yourself, as often as necessary, that intense emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. When you are in the middle of grief, acute anxiety, or deep despair, it can feel with complete conviction as though the pain will never lift. But emotions are energy in motion, and when given space to flow, rather than being fought or suppressed, they eventually transform and subside. Fighting against painful emotions or judging yourself harshly for experiencing them only intensifies and prolongs the suffering rather than resolving it. The inner dialogue during challenging periods becomes critically important. Notice honestly whether you are adding unnecessary suffering to necessary pain through self-criticism and judgment. Pain is genuinely unavoidable in life, but a significant portion of suffering is optional. It comes from resistance to what is happening, or from our harsh judgment of ourselves for being affected by difficulty in the first place. Ask yourself with honesty, what would I say to someone I love who is going through this exact situation? Then offer yourself those same words of comfort and genuine understanding. Self-forgiveness becomes particularly essential during life's storms because crises frequently involve mistakes, poor decisions, or actions we later genuinely regret. Self-love means acknowledging these human imperfections honestly, without sliding into the shame and self-condemnation that make recovery impossible. It means learning from what happened without using it as a permanent indictment of who you are. Professional support becomes a genuine act of self-love during significant challenges. Seeking therapy or counseling during difficult periods is not evidence of weakness, but of real wisdom. You would not hesitate to see a doctor for a physical injury. Mental and emotional injuries deserve the same level of care and professional attention. The storms of life ultimately become opportunities to deepen your self-love rather than to destroy it. Each challenge you navigate with self-compassion strengthens your confidence in your own resilience and builds faith in your capacity to recover. Over time, these experiences become the evidence base for a genuinely unshakable belief in yourself, one that cannot be dismantled by external circumstances because it has been forged through real difficulty rather than existing only in theory. Each storm you move through with genuine self-compassion adds another layer to this foundation, and eventually you discover something remarkable. You are not afraid of hard times in the way you once were, because you have learned through lived experience that you can navigate them and that you will still be standing on the other side, with your relationship with yourself not only intact, but actually deepened and strengthened by what you passed through. Chapter 11. Advanced Self-Love Practices for Unshakable Confidence. Once you have established a genuine foundation of self-love and worked through the primary barriers that have been undermining it, it is time to develop the advanced practices that create authentic, unshakable confidence and deep self-acceptance that endures. These techniques move beyond basic self-care and intentional positive thinking to address the unconscious patterns and core beliefs that most fundamentally determine how you show up in the world across all situations. The first advanced practice is shadow work, identifying and genuinely integrating the parts of yourself that you have rejected or hidden from conscious awareness. Everyone has aspects of their personality that they consider unacceptable, shameful, or dangerous to express. Maybe you have rejected your anger because you were taught it was destructive or frightening. Perhaps you have suppressed your sensitivity because you learned it was weakness in a world that rewards toughness. You might deny your ambition because you were told it was selfish or unseemly. These rejected parts do not disappear when you deny their existence. They operate below the surface of awareness, creating internal conflict and generating self-sabotage in ways that feel mysterious and hard to interrupt. When you judge parts of yourself harshly and consistently, you are essentially in an ongoing state of internal war. This conflict drains your energy continuously and prevents the kind of authentic self-expression that genuine confidence requires. Shadow work involves acknowledging these rejected aspects with honest compassion and finding healthy, appropriate ways to express and integrate them. A useful starting point: identify the qualities you most strongly dislike or judge in other people. What you find most disturbing in others frequently reflects what you have most forcefully rejected in yourself. If arrogance triggers you intensely, you may have suppressed your own confidence and healthy ambition. If emotional expression in others feels threatening or excessive, you may have driven your own emotional experience deep underground. These triggers are not pleasant, but they are genuinely useful. They point toward parts of yourself that are waiting for your love and conscious integration. The practice of loving your own flaws is another advanced technique that produces profound self-acceptance when engaged with genuine sincerity. Instead of trying continuously to fix or hide your imperfections, you learn to appreciate them as part of your authentic and unrepeatable humanity. Your sensitivity makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you genuinely compassionate and deeply perceptive. Your perfectionism creates stress, but it also generates standards of excellence that others appreciate in your work. Your intensity can overwhelm some people, but it also produces passion and depth that creates real impact. This does not mean becoming complacent or deciding that growth is unnecessary. It means accepting yourself fully as you are right now, while simultaneously remaining committed to becoming who you want to be. You can love your current impatience while actively developing greater patience. You can accept your anxiety while building your emotional regulation skills with genuine commitment. This paradoxical approach, accepting what is while reaching toward what could be, eliminates the self-attack that actually prevents real change and creates instead the psychological safety necessary for genuine and lasting transformation. Visualization and deliberate mental rehearsal become powerful tools for building unshakable confidence. Your brain cannot reliably distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. This means you can literally program confidence into your nervous system through consistent, detailed visualization practice. Spend real time each day imagining yourself navigating challenges with ease and grace, speaking your truth with clarity and calm, and achieving your meaningful goals with genuine satisfaction. Make these visualizations as sensory-rich and emotionally resonant as possible. The more real you make these mental rehearsals, the more your brain integrates them as actual experience and adjusts your self-concept and nervous system response accordingly. The practice of celebrating yourself deliberately and consistently is essential for building the kind of confidence that does not require constant external reinforcement. Most people notice their mistakes and shortcomings with remarkable speed and precision, while glossing over their genuine achievements and real growth. Advanced self-love means consciously and regularly acknowledging what you have done well, what courage you have demonstrated, and what progress you have made, regardless of whether anyone else has noticed or commented. Keep a daily record of your efforts, your small wins, and your moments of genuine integrity. Review it regularly. Let the evidence of your own capability and character accumulate into something you can actually see and feel. This is not vanity. This is the honest and necessary practice of accurately perceiving yourself, including your strengths and your growth, rather than only your deficiencies. These advanced practices require real consistency and genuine patience to produce their full effect, but they create the kind of profound transformation that makes everything else in your life possible. When you have done the deep work of genuinely loving yourself, including your shadows, your flaws, and your most vulnerable places, you become truly and lastingly unshakable in a way that cannot be manufactured through external achievement or external approval. External criticism loses its power to define you because you know your own worth from the inside. Failure loses its power to devastate you because your sense of value is not built on outcomes alone. Rejection loses its ability to crush you because you have your own love, your own acceptance, and your own steady companionship to return to. Always available, always genuine, and always entirely your own. Chapter 12. The Art of Self-Love in Romance and Dating. One of the most challenging arenas in which to maintain genuine self-love is in romantic relationships and dating. The desire for love, deep connection, and intimate companionship is among the most powerful drives in human experience. And this very intensity creates enormous temptation to abandon yourself in pursuit of romantic validation and acceptance from another person. people sacrifice their authentic values, dismiss obvious warning signs, tolerate consistently poor treatment, and gradually lose their own identity in pursuit of a relationship that will finally make them feel worthy and complete. Learning to love yourself while actively dating and within committed relationships requires conscious, sustained practice and clear, consistent limits. The foundation of healthy romantic connection is arriving as a genuinely whole person rather than as a half person desperate for completion. When you don't love yourself, you approach potential partners as saviors who might repair your loneliness, validate your worth, and supply the love you have not yet learned to provide yourself. This creates an inherently imbalanced dynamic where your willingness to tolerate, accommodate, and compromise has no real floor because you need the relationship too much to risk losing it by honoring yourself. When you genuinely love yourself, you approach dating and romantic connection from abundance rather than scarcity. You know that you are already complete as you are. You understand that a relationship is meant to genuinely enhance your life, not to fix or complete it. You are looking for a partner who complements your authentic self rather than one who compensates for what you feel you lack. This shift in the underlying energy of how you show up is immediately and powerfully attractive to the right kinds of people, because genuine self-possession is one of the most compelling qualities a person can carry. Self-love in dating begins with knowing and honestly honoring your values, genuine limits, and real non-negotiables before you enter any significant romantic situation. What qualities are genuinely essential in a partner for you? What behaviors are absolutely incompatible with your well-being and your integrity? What kind of relationship dynamic do you actually want to create and sustain? When you know these things clearly and take them seriously, you can make decisions that honor your authentic self rather than simply trying to be whoever seems most likely to be liked by the person in front of you. Many people lose themselves in the early phases of romantic connection by working continuously to become whatever they imagine the other person wants. They hide aspects of their personality that might be polarizing, agree with perspectives they don't actually share, and enthusiastically pretend to enjoy activities that genuinely bore them. This people-pleasing strategy might attract initial interest, but it attracts that interest to a carefully constructed, false version of you. If the relationship develops on that foundation, it will eventually collapse when the real you inevitably surfaces, and you will have wasted both of your time. Self-love means showing up authentically from the very beginning, even when doing so means some people will not be interested. It is genuinely better to be clearly passed over for who you actually are than to be temporarily chosen for who you were performing. When you are fully authentic, you attract people who genuinely like and appreciate the real version of you, which is the only foundation from which a genuinely meaningful and lasting romantic connection can actually be built. The capacity to be comfortably alone is among the most powerful gifts that genuine self-love brings to your romantic life. When you are genuinely afraid of solitude, you will accept almost anything to avoid it. You will stay in relationships that are clearly not serving you. Ignore significant incompatibilities because addressing them feels too risky, and sacrifice your authentic self repeatedly to maintain the connection at any cost. When you genuinely enjoy your own company and do not experience solitude as an emergency to be escaped, being single becomes a genuinely acceptable and even pleasant option, and this completely changes the power dynamic of every romantic situation you enter. You can choose relationships that truly enhance your life rather than accepting whatever is available. You can walk away from what does not honor you because you trust that you will be fine on your own. This is not coldness or detachment. It is the deepest form of self-respect, and it creates the conditions from which real and lasting romantic love can actually thrive. The paradox of self-love in romance is this: the less you need a relationship to feel complete, the more genuinely ready you are to participate in one. The less you are willing to abandon yourself for the sake of connection, the deeper and more real the connection you will eventually find becomes. Self-love does not close you off from love. It opens you fully to it, for the first time, as a whole and willing person, rather than as someone desperately searching for what they have not yet been able to give themselves. Chapter 13. Living Your Truth Through Radical Self-Acceptance. Living authentically is one of the highest and most demanding expressions of genuine self-love. It requires the ongoing courage to be yourself, even when that self does not match others' expectations, does not conform to cultural norms, or does not align with who you used to present yourself as being. Authenticity means expressing your actual thoughts, real feelings, genuine desires, and true values, even when doing so carries real risk of judgment, rejection, or conflict with people whose opinions have mattered to you. Most people live primarily through what psychologist Carl Jung described as the persona, the mask, constructed and maintained for the purpose of being acceptable to others. This persona is assembled from childhood messages about who you ought to be, cultural expectations about your role and identity, and careful calculations about what will gain approval and prevent rejection. While the persona serves a genuine protective function, living through this constructed self rather than your authentic, one creates a profound and exhausting disconnection from your true nature. The cost of sustained inauthenticity is significant and cumulative. When you consistently suppress your genuine self to fit in or be liked, you experience what psychologists call identity foreclosure. You never fully develop or express your authentic personality, your real talents, or the potential that is uniquely yours. You make major life choices based on how they appear to others rather than how they feel to you from within. You enter careers and relationships that match your persona rather than your authentic nature, and live with the chronic low-grade sense that something important is missing or wrong. Living authentically through radical self-acceptance means embracing all of yourself, including the dimensions that are unconventional, that challenge others' expectations, or that differ meaningfully from who you have been told you should be. It means honoring your natural personality without apology, whether you are more introverted than your family wants you to be, more emotionally sensitive than your culture values, or more ambitious than your immediate peer group understands or celebrates. This process often begins with genuine identity exploration, actively investigating who you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning and expectation that have accumulated over a lifetime. Start by asking yourself fundamental and honest questions. What do I actually enjoy doing, independent of what I think I should enjoy? What are my real values? Not the ones I inherited or adopted to gain acceptance, but the ones I feel in my bones. What kind of life would I create if I knew with certainty I could not fail, and that no one whose opinion I fear would be watching? These questions can produce genuine discomfort because they might reveal that you have been living according to someone else's blueprint rather than your own. Radical self-acceptance involves embracing what makes you genuinely different rather than working to conform to some imagined standard of normalcy. Your quirks, your unusual interests, your unconventional perspective, your particular way of experiencing and responding to the world. These are not problems requiring correction. They are gifts, and the very things that make you distinctly different from others are frequently your greatest assets and the source of your most meaningful contribution. This acceptance extends to your emotional nature without exception. Perhaps you feel things more intensely than most people around you. Perhaps you need significantly more solitude than your culture considers normal. Perhaps you engage with ideas or with people in ways that seem excessive or unusual to those around you. These are not character defects. They are aspects of your authentic constitution that deserve genuine respect, both from you and in the standards you set for how others engage with you. Living authentically also means expressing your genuine truth, even when it is uncomfortable or unpopular with people you care about. This might involve setting consistent limits with family members who want you to be someone you are not. It might mean pursuing a path that does not match what others expect or approve of. It might mean sharing perspectives that differ from your social group's consensus in ways that generate friction. Each act of authentic expression, however small, strengthens your relationship with yourself and gradually draws toward you the people and opportunities that genuinely align with who you actually are. The fear of disapproval often prevents authentic expression, but radical self-acceptance helps you recognize something important. When people reject your authentic self, they are revealing their incompatibility with your genuine nature. This is not a loss. It is clarifying information that protects your time and energy and redirects them toward genuine alignment. Living authentically also means making choices about your career, your relationships, and your lifestyle based on what truly matters to you rather than on what will meet external standards of impressiveness or success. You might choose meaningful work that pays less over lucrative work that drains you. You might prioritize creative expression over conventional security. These choices often require genuine courage because they disappoint people or diverge from expected paths. But living authentically means trusting yourself enough to make decisions that honor your true nature, even when those decisions seem unconventional or risky to others. Living authentically through radical self-acceptance is ultimately an act of service that extends well beyond your personal life. When you fully embrace and genuinely express your authentic self, you implicitly give others permission to do the same. You become a living example of what becomes possible when a person has the courage to show up as themselves without performing or pretending. Your willingness to be real becomes a quiet but powerful gift, one that inspires others to discover and express their own genuine nature in ways they might not have believed were available to them. Authenticity at this level is not a personal luxury. It is a contribution. It is your unique way of adding something irreplaceable to the shared human experience, something that no one else can contribute, because no one else is you. And the world, in ways both visible and invisible, is genuinely better when the people in it have the courage to be who they actually are, rather than who they have been taught they should be. Chapter 14. The compound effect of self-love over time. Understanding the compound effect of self-love is essential for maintaining genuine motivation during the inevitable difficult stretches of personal transformation. Like financial investments that grow exponentially through the power of compounding, small daily acts of self-love accumulate over time to create changes in your life, your relationships, and your overall experience of being alive that are truly profound. The key insight is this: self-love is not just about feeling better in any given moment. It is about establishing a trajectory that becomes increasingly better as time passes, one that builds momentum and generates returns that grow larger and more visible with each passing month and year. In the earliest stages of developing self-love, the changes may feel subtle or even entirely invisible. You might practice self-compassion consistently for several weeks and notice no dramatic shifts in your confidence or your external circumstances. This is precisely where many people give up, concluding that these practices are ineffective or not worth the sustained effort they require. But this initial phase is like planting seeds in fertile soil. The growth is genuinely happening. It is simply underground, establishing the root systems that will eventually support significant and visible transformation at the surface. The compound effect operates through neuroplasticity. Every time you choose self-compassion over self-criticism, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with self-acceptance. Every time you set a healthy limit and hold it, you reinforce the neural circuits associated with self-respect and personal integrity. Every time you practice authentic expression rather than performing for approval, you build the networks that support genuine confidence and inner security. These neural changes begin small but accelerate with time, building on each other in precisely the way that compound interest builds on itself. After consistent self-love practices maintained over several months, you will begin to notice that self-compassion arises more automatically than it used to. Self-critical internal dialogue naturally decreases in frequency and intensity, while genuine self-regard increases. Your default emotional state begins to shift, not dramatically or permanently, but measurably, from chronic anxiety and self-doubt toward a quieter, more consistent baseline of inner calm and confidence. These internal changes then begin to manifest in your external circumstances in concrete ways. Your decision-making improves because you are no longer making choices primarily from fear or the need for approval. Your relationships shift because you are bringing greater honesty, clearer limits, and more genuine presence to them. Your professional life improves because increased confidence generates better performance, which creates more opportunity, which builds even greater confidence in a cycle that feeds itself. Your health improves because when you genuinely value yourself, you naturally Take better care of your body, not out of obligation or anxiety, but out of the honest recognition that your physical well-being matters because you matter. The financial benefits of self-love compound significantly as well, though they are often the last thing people associate with an inner practice. When you genuinely believe you deserve good things and are not unconsciously working to undermine your own success, you make better financial decisions, pursue higher value opportunities, negotiate more effectively for your own interests, and avoid the financial relationships and patterns that exploit your lack of self-worth. Perhaps the most valuable and far-reaching compound benefit of self-love is the resilience it builds over time. Each challenge you navigate with genuine self-compassion adds to your growing confidence in your ability to handle future difficulties. The evidence accumulates, not as an abstract belief, but as a lived, embodied knowledge built from actual experience. You know, because you have demonstrated it to yourself repeatedly, that you can move through hard things and arrive on the other side still intact, still growing, still fundamentally okay. This resilience becomes a competitive advantage in every meaningful area of your life that no external credential or achievement can provide. The generational ripple effects of self-love may be its most profound compound benefit. When you love yourself consistently and visibly, you model a way of being for your children, your family members, and the people in your broader community. You interrupt cycles of self-rejection and shame that may have been passed down through generations without anyone recognizing them as patterns that could be changed. Your self-love becomes a gift that radiates outward to everyone whose life genuinely touches yours, which is more people than you will ever fully know. The compound effect of self-love ultimately produces the most important transformation. You become someone who naturally and authentically inspires others to love themselves more completely, not through preaching or performance, but through the living example of what it looks and feels like when a person has done the genuine work of building an unshakable relationship with themselves. This is the kind of influence that cannot be engineered or faked. It simply radiates outward, quietly and continuously, from a person who has genuinely done the inner work. And the extraordinary thing is this: you do not have to be finished. You do not have to have arrived at some perfected state. You simply have to be genuinely on the path, showing up each day with real intention, real honesty, and real kindness toward yourself. That is enough. That, in fact, is everything. Because it is the daily practice, repeated with consistency and genuine care, that produces everything else. Chapter 15. Becoming your most loved self. You have arrived at the final chapter of this journey, but this is not an ending. It is a graduation, a crossing of a threshold into a new and more spacious way of inhabiting your own life. Everything explored in the pages you have listened to is meaningful only insofar as you integrate it into your daily existence and genuinely become the person who loves themselves consistently, deeply, and without condition. This final chapter is about embodying everything you have discovered and stepping fully into your power as someone who is unshakably committed to their own well-being, their own authentic expression, and their own ongoing growth. Becoming your most loved self means that self-love is no longer something you practice occasionally when you remember to, or when you feel sufficiently motivated to make the effort. It becomes your default way of operating in the world, the water you swim in, rather than a practice you dip into and out of. Self-compassion becomes as natural and as automatic as breathing. Setting limits becomes part of how you simply exist in relationship with others. Authentic expression becomes the most comfortable way of showing up in any room. You have rewired your brain so thoroughly through consistent practice that loving yourself is simply who you are, rather than something you are intermittently trying to do. This transformation does not occur overnight, and it does not mean you will never again experience self-doubt, self-criticism, or moments of genuine vulnerability and insecurity. What it means is that these moments become brief exceptions rather than your ongoing baseline experience. When negative self-talk arises, you notice it quickly and redirect it with the compassion that has become natural to you. When you make mistakes, you recover more rapidly because your self-worth has been genuinely decoupled from the requirement for perfection. When others criticize or reject you, the impact is real but not devastating, because the foundation beneath you is solid and familiar and genuinely your own. Your most loved self operates from abundance rather than scarcity in every domain of your life. You give love freely because you have a genuine and renewable supply of it within yourself. You pursue opportunities from a place of authentic excitement and curiosity rather than anxious desperation. You make decisions based on what aligns with who you actually are, rather than on what will generate maximum approval from others. You attract success naturally because you are no longer unconsciously blocking it with the belief that you don't deserve it. The relationships in your life reflect this transformation clearly. You are surrounded by people who appreciate and celebrate your authentic self because you have stopped tolerating those who don't, not with bitterness or judgment, but simply with the clarity that your time and energy belong where they are genuinely honored. You communicate with directness and warmth because you are not afraid of your own truth. You support others' growth and success generously because their achievements carry no threat to your own sense of worth. The daily life of your most loved self looks genuinely different from your old patterns. You begin each day with some quality of appreciation for the life available to you and for your capacity to engage with it meaningfully. You make choices throughout the day that honor your needs and reflect your values. You end each day with recognition of your efforts and your genuine growth rather than with a catalog of your perceived shortcomings. Your most loved self navigates life's inevitable challenges with grace and accumulated wisdom rather than with collapse and self-attack. Instead of falling into victimhood when difficulty arrives, you ask yourself what this situation is asking of you and what it might be teaching you. You seek support when you genuinely need it, without shame or the belief that needing help makes you a burden. You take honest responsibility for your role in creating your experiences without turning that responsibility into self-punishment. You bounce back from setbacks with speed and steadiness because your resilience rests on a foundation that was built deliberately and maintained consistently over time. This is your invitation to step fully into this version of yourself, not at some future point when you have become more deserving or more ready, but now, in this moment, with everything you currently are. Your most loved self is not a distant ideal. It is the you that emerges when you stop fighting yourself and start genuinely supporting yourself instead. You can choose self-compassion over self-criticism in your very next moment. You can set a limit that honors your worth today. You can express your authentic truth in your next conversation. The world genuinely benefits from your most loved self, from your unique gifts, your honest perspective, and your full and unguarded presence. It benefits from the example you provide of what becomes possible when someone commits fully and consistently to their own growth, their own well-being, and their own irreplaceable value. The journey of self-love has no final destination. There will always be new depths to discover, new aspects of yourself to welcome home, and new ways to honor the remarkable and unrepeatable person you are. But here is what many people discover after a genuine commitment to this path. The journey itself becomes the reward. Walking your life with love, with honesty, and with deep appreciation for yourself. That is not a means to an end. That is the fullest expression of what a human life can be. You now carry everything you need to begin. The question has never been whether you are capable of this transformation. You are. The question is simply whether you are willing to commit to yourself with the same dedication and consistency you have given to so many other things. Are you ready to become your own greatest source of love? Are you ready to live as your most loved and most genuine self? The path is open. It has always been open, and it begins exactly where you are standing right now. Not after more preparation, not when you feel more ready, not once you have handled the other things first. Right now, in this breath, with this moment as your starting point. Self-love is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose, again and again, in the small decisions and the large ones, in the moments when it is easy, and especially in the moments when it is not. And every single time you choose it, you are building something that belongs entirely and irreversibly to you. Something that no circumstance can permanently take away and no person can ultimately provide for you. A genuine, grounded, and lasting love for the person you are. That is the most important thing you will ever build. And you are already building it. Chapter 16. The Daily Practice of Becoming. Everything you have discovered across these 15 chapters points toward one simple but demanding truth. Self-love is not a revelation. It is not a moment of sudden clarity that arrives and changes everything overnight. It is a practice. It is the accumulation of small, deliberate, repeated choices made in ordinary moments. The moments no one else sees, the moments that don't feel significant while you are living them. The moments that quietly become the foundation of who you are. Most people wait for transformation to arrive from the outside. They wait for the right relationship, the right opportunity, the right version of themselves to finally appear. But the person you are waiting to become is already being built, or being left unbuilt, by what you choose to do with the next 5 minutes, The next conversation, the next moment you feel the pull towards self-criticism and have to decide whether to follow it or redirect it. That is where self-love actually lives, not in the grand gestures, in the small ones, in the pause before you speak harshly to yourself, in the breath you take before reacting from a wound rather than responding from wisdom, in the moment you choose to set a limit, even though it is uncomfortable, in the quiet decision to honor what you need rather than performing what others expect. These are the moments that compound. These are the moments that, added together over days and weeks and months and years, produce the person who is genuinely unshakable. Not because life stopped being difficult, but because the relationship with yourself became strong enough to hold you through anything it brings. There is a version of you that already exists on the other side of this practice. That version wakes up each morning without the first thought being a verdict on their own adequacy. They move through the day, making choices from a center of genuine self-knowledge, rather than from the anxious periphery of others' expectations. They face difficulty with steadiness, not because they feel no pain, but because they have learned that pain does not require their own condemnation to be added on top of it. They give generously to the people they love, to the work they care about, to the world they are part of, because they are giving from fullness rather than from the desperate hope that giving enough will finally earn them the right to feel worthy. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is the natural outcome of the practice you are beginning or continuing right now. And the distance between where you are and where that version of you lives is not measured in years or in extraordinary effort. It is measured in consistency, in the willingness to return again and again, without drama and without self-judgment, to the simple commitment of treating yourself with honesty, with compassion, and with genuine care. Begin today with one question, not a complicated one, not one that requires hours of reflection or a perfectly quiet mind. Simply ask yourself, in this moment, what is the kindest and most honest thing I can offer myself? Sometimes the answer is rest. Sometimes it is movement. Sometimes it is the courage to say something true that you have been holding back. Sometimes it is simply the decision to stop the internal assault for the next 10 minutes and allow yourself to exist without evaluation. Whatever the answer is, follow it. Do it without waiting until you feel you deserve it. Do it without requiring yourself to have earned it through sufficient productivity or sufficient perfection. Do it because you are a human being, and human beings deserve their own care. That is the whole of it. That is the practice distilled to its most essential form. Not a program, not a system, not a version of yourself you have to construct from scratch. Simply the ongoing, renewable, always available choice to meet yourself exactly as you are, exactly where you are, with the same quality of kindness you would offer someone you genuinely love. You are that someone. You have always been that someone. And every moment you remember it is a moment that belongs entirely to you.